Good afternoon, committee. Thank you so much for being here. And we have, before we do the roll call, we have 8 bills on the calendar today. I think we can move smartly through those. Two of these came back from the House floor. We referred. We get to that. And so, committee, let's have the roll call, and then we will begin.
Representatives Baum, Bulso, Butler, Sapicki, Fritz, Gant,
Here.
Gillespie, Haston, Hurt, Lafferty, Love, McKenzie, Parkinson, Reagan, Ritchie, Stevens, Warner, Vice Chairman Slater, Chairman White.
Here.
Mr. Chairman, you have a quorum.
Thank you very much. Members, anybody have any announcements, recognitions you'd like to do before we begin? Okay, seeing none, let's begin our committee with a prayer as we always do. Let's bow our heads. Most Holy Heavenly Father, we thank you for your blessings and for the time that we can come together as individuals and work on issues that are important to our children, our schools, our teachers, our families, our homes, and just give us the wisdom and the understanding to do the right thing. Thank you for this committee and the members that sit on it and the hard work that they put in trying to understand legislation and do what they think is just. We have a special prayer now to watch over our children in our schools as they go through their educational daily process to learn. Watch over them, keep them safe, keep their teachers safe, and may our schools in Tennessee prosper. Through the name of Jesus, we pray. Amen. Okay, members, like I said, we only have 8 bills, and I think we can move smartly through these. This will be our last calendar, except for the call of the chair. If something comes up, we have to reopen. But we're going to start with House Bill 1324, item number 1 by Leader Camper. Is Leader Camper in the room yet? If not, we will roll that a space and maybe she'll walk in. Let's go to item number 2, House Bill 457 by Representative Hakeem. This is a motion and a second, and this is one that has been re-referred. So I will turn it over to Representative for discussion, and then I think we have an amendment that we'll talk about.
Okay.
You're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members. What we've done is working with colleagues here in the legislature, the TSSAA, and Alex Diamond, Director of Youth Sports Health Center at Vanderbilt, is to put together a bill with revisions that you spoke of that we'll put forward. Basically, what we're doing is providing opportunities for coaches to be able to get training in regards to health issues that may arise on site where this training is available. And I think that's the essence of the bill. And going through, they already go through concussion recognition and so forth. So essentially, this is really when I say a House bill, both Democrats and Republicans have put their piece in there, and hopefully it's something that this committee will find acceptable.
Thank you very much, Representative Hakeem. And members, the Amendment 4714 is already on the bill, which is the reason we didn't have to add that again. Now, before we go to the Amendment 7080, is there any questions to the sponsor of the bill at this point? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to recognize Representative Sapicki. You have an amendment?
I do. Members, it's code 007080.
Correct. You got a motion, a second. You may explain. I know it says rewrites the bill, but since this is your amendment on his bill, I'd like for you to explain it first before we take a vote.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's a very simple bill. It's a very simple amendment. We've worked with the sponsor. One of the things we wanted to do is we wanted to remove the term high risk because it would delineate just certain sports. We want to make sure that all coaches when they get with these kids, they get the necessary training for concussion protocols, for cardiac arrest, things like that. So basically, all we've done in the bill, the nature of the bill, the spirit of the bill is all the same. We've just taken out the word high risk to make sure that all coaches are going to be trained to make sure they protect our children. That's what the amendment is. I move adoption.
Give that explanation. I will defer to the sponsor of the original bill, Representative King. You have comments?
No, sir. We accept the adjustments, and I think it enhances the bill from what it was before.
Okay, I appreciate y'all working together to come up to a bill that did have some objections at first. Members, Chairman Reagan? The question on the amendment. We're on the amendment. Is there any objection to that amendment or that question being called? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor of adding Amendment 7087 to House Bill 457 indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. The bill is properly amended. Any further discussion?
No, sir. Asked for approval.
Chairman Reagan? Any objection to that question? Seeing none, all those in favor of moving 457 out of the calendar rules indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members. Truly, I appreciate it.
And thank you for working with everyone to get the bill in
Yes, sir.
a great position. Don't see Leader Camper yet. She's on her way. Okay, we'll roll her one more space. Let's now go to item number 3, House Bill 727 by Representative Fritz. You have a motion and a second on your bill. Which one of the amendments are we on? All three of them.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There are 3 amendments that you'll see. 6523 makes the bill.
Okay, members, amendment number 6523 is sponsored, does make the bill, rewrites the bill. Any objection to adding it to the bill for proper discussion? Motion's been called. You have a second. All those in favor of adding amendment 6523 onto the bill 727 indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Your bill is properly amended now. You may describe.
Mr. Chairman, there are 2 other amendments that, if with your permission, I'll go ahead and talk through 6774.
Okay, amendment number 2 on your sheet, members, 6774. Everybody see that? We have a motion and second, and you may describe the amendment.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee members. Amendment 6774 simply adds to the language of the bill an opt-out for.
May I stop you a second?
Yes, sir.
It wasn't on here. That amendment 6774 is by Chairman Haston. It's got you, so we'll have to let you.
I'll work with Representative Fritz on this. I don't know what the protocol is. He's welcome to describe it, or I'll be glad to, whatever we need to do.
Okay, so you're going to defer to the sponsor.
That's
Okay.
fine.
Okay, with that objection, we're going to defer to the sponsor. You may continue.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Tracy. Amendment 6774 simply takes to an opt-out rather than opt-in for physical health screenings. It includes vision, dental, dermatology, blood pressure, hearing, cholesterol, and BMI. And after working with the sponsor of the amendment, this seemed to be the prudent thing to do for this bill. So I would ask for your support on it.
Okay, before we do consider adopting the amendment, would you go back and make sure we understand the bill that
Yes, sir.
we're
Absolutely.
amending?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So what we have in front of us, committee, is Bill 727. And House Bill 727 moves to have parents opt in for most activities within the schools. The amendment simply aligns with some of the things that we have done on this committee and others to raise the expectations in our school systems. I would offer that we just passed HB 322 recently, raising the expectation for school safety. We passed HB 329, raising expectations in caring for our teachers and teacher pay. 843 in expectations for materials. And this bill simply raises expectations for parental engagement and consent to what the young people learn in school. So if you look at the wording of the bill, what we simply see is that House Bill 727 allows for the parent to opt in. They're given access to required to be given access to all of the the materials for surveys and evaluations and so forth that the student would be exposed to. That is section number 1 of the bill. It requires a written, informed, and voluntarily signed consent. This does not apply to classroom instruction. It does not. And it does not apply to measures of evaluation which determine the effectiveness of the curriculum that is offered. These evaluations that you see in surveys are a reference to other screenings and evaluations that might be conducted in a school type setting. Section number 2, as we discussed, the health services, the amendment adds in the ability for the parents to opt out, as is current law, but provides that the parent is not required to opt in for those specific things I read for physical health screenings: vision, dental, dermatology, blood pressure, hearing, cholesterol, and BMI. Section 3 simply says that the parents are required to opt in before their student is exposed to sexual orientation curriculum or gender identity curriculum. And number 2, in section 3B2, says that the student cannot be penalized if they opt out of those curriculum type courses. Section 4, which would be the Second Amendment, Mr. Chairman, 7193, and that amendment simply adds the definition to what an adult minor is, if you will, 18 years old and up. So that you will see throughout the language of the bill that the parental or guardian consent is required, but you'll also see in this bill that those students have reached the mature age of 18 years old can sign those consents for themselves.
And thank you for that complete explanation. And this is another one's been before us a number of weeks, committee, and I appreciate the sponsor working with all parties to kind of get this worked out. Chairman Sapicki?
Thank you. Just 2 questions, Mr. Chairman. One, if an LEA wants to do a survey on a student, let's say in August or September when they come back in, and the notification is sent out and the parents opt in or opt out, whichever one it is, right?
Mm-hmm.
If they send another survey, the process would have to be repeated with another opt in or opt out. Once you opt in as a parent, you're not opting in for everything. It would have to be on an individual basis moving forward, correct?
You recognize?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, sir, you're absolutely correct. It is not a universal opt-in for the entire year. If there are changes made over the year, the parental consent would be required again. And it's noteworthy to that question, thank you for that question, sir, that the parents maintain the right in this bill to be able to opt out for portions of the curriculum as well.
Okay, and members, just for clarity, because I did jump around, I had the sponsor describe the bill. We still have the Second Amendment, 6774 before us, deletes the section requiring an opt-out of coordinated school health. But we haven't voted on that yet, but I'm still taking questions, so I'm going to go to Chairman Love right now.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To the sponsor, can you walk me through the process of how the LEA would be able to gather all of these consent forms and be able to know that they're all collected?
You recognize?
Yes, sir, be happy to. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for that question. There's no requirement for just paper. This could also be done electronically. We do that in many school systems today. They track those with current databases that they use today for the ability to be able to opt out. I don't think this produces any undue burden on the school systems.
Okay. Thank you, sponsor. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Representative McKenzie?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And kind of along those same lines, but I guess it's more in having an informed decision in this process. Will there be a syllabus or a course outline that talks to the parents about the elements? Let's pick the sex ed training that talks about what they're going to be talking about, so that the parents can make an informed decision, or is it just going to list the course and say, do you want your son or daughter in or out?
You recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. That's another great question. Thanks, sir. The due diligence of the school system would require, as is current law requires, that the students are given, or the parents are given access to what the students may learn in school. And certainly it would be incumbent upon that school system to provide some detail. As is inferred in the bill, the parent has the ability to opt out of portions or opt into portions. And that would require what you just described.
Representative McKenzie.
Yeah, and I definitely want to get around your bill because I want to support it. But I just want to make sure that the parents know what they're opting in and opting out of, because it sounds like they can flow back and forth. If there's a piece on this aspect, let's stick with sex education. Of sex education, they can opt out of it, but another aspect they can opt in. And will the LEA be required to provide them with even a link that has the coursework before they opt in or out, or is it that they can just go if their son or daughter is in the class that they can follow along?
You recognize,
Is that
sponsor.
a requirement? Sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And as the bill states about access to review all the material, that becomes an important part, I think, of what you just described. The bill's intent is to require an opt-in for most things, as you see in the bill. Those exemptions from opt-in, whether it would be opt-out, are those things that we work to include the health screenings.
You're good? Okay. Thank you. Okay, members, I don't have any more questions on this particular one. We're on amendment number 2, 6774. Any further discussion on that amendment? Everyone have clarity there? Questions been added on the amendment. All those in favor of adding amendment 6774 to House Bill 727 indicate by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. We now have a third amendment. Representative Fritz, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Amendment 7193 simply adds a definition.
You got a
for
motion, second, you can describe.
Thank you. Adds a definition of a minor student into the bill for that specific section, Section 4 of the bill. It had not been clearly covered, and that was added in when we discovered that.
Members, questions, discussion on Amendment 3? Questions been called by Representative Ritchie. All those in favor of adding Amendment 7193 to House Bill 727 indicate by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. So we roll these together? And we will roll all three of these amendments on this bill going forward. So when it hits
Thank
the
you.
House floor, you'll have one amendment. Okay, thank you, sir. Now we will vote on the entire bill. All those in favor of moving House Bill 727 to calendar rules indicate by saying aye. Opposed? Ayes have it. Moves out of calendar rules.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, committee.
Okay, members, flip back over to item number 1. We had Road Leader Camper's bill, House Bill 1324. You have a motion and a second. Leader Camper, Representative McKenzie wanted to move this to summer study, but we held him up.
Thank you,
So-
Mr. Chairman.
Yeah. So, yeah, we wouldn't let him go there. So you're recognized on House Bill 1324.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee. Please forgive me for being late. I was still meeting with the finance chairman, and so I'm sorry I was late.
No, I understand. And members, by the way, Amendment 6177 has already been adopted to the bill, so we don't have to add that again. So you're free to go ahead and explain your bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, members, what the bill does as amended is expands the conditions for which a member of a local school board of education may participate electronically in a scheduled board meeting. I talked before about conditions under which they could do it, whether you are chronically ill, disabled, or if there has been a natural disaster where the schools are actually closed. One of the questions that a member had last week, and I thanked them for it, was concerns around the number of time, which we were increasing to 6. We've worked with the Senate to get that to 3 in their amendment. So when it comes to the House, it'll be just 3 times that this could happen, and I'm going to substitute and conform to the Senate bill if we get this to the floor, Mr. Chairman. So that kind of explains the bill.
With that
Thank you.
explanation, Representative Warner? You're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I understand why we went virtual back when we had the pandemic going on, but what is the real reason for this?
You're recognized, sponsor.
So this is only not for the board itself to meet virtually. This is saying that if the board is meeting and I had a hip replacement, I'm at home convalescing, I can still participate. So I could Zoom into the meeting like we would be here, and then someone could Zoom in and still be a part of the proceedings. Only if I'm in a position where in this case, one of our members had a stroke, and the doctor was saying she didn't need to be out. So she still wanted to participate in the meetings, but she couldn't electronically. And it's not for the meetings themselves to be virtual.
Right. You don't think this could be abused a little bit when maybe there's a controversial issue or something other where they really don't have to face the public? They can kind of stay at home and.
Leader Camper?
I don't. I think members want to serve. I think they want to be there. And that was her concern, was she could not be there to have a voice or
Right.
to discuss or talk. I think I'm not seeing that with this legislation, but I understand your point.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Chairman Slater?
Yes, thank you, Leader Camper. And just one question. I can't remember, is this permissive? In other words, can counties adopt this or not? Is this a permissive bill?
You recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, it's only authorizing them to do it. It's not a mandate by the state or any of that. Any local board could choose or not choose. We're just saying that we want to make it available for them if someone is in this situation.
Thank you.
Representative Ritchie?
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, sponsor. Question I've got some concerns on whether this is going to be abused, like it was mentioned before. But under section 4 down there, IV down there, it says a member has a family emergency that inhibits the member from attending the board of meetings. What falls under the qualifications or classifications for a family emergency? I just think that could end up being purposes for abuse right there alone.
Leader Camper?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Actually, that's currently in the law. We're not changing that portion. That's not what we're doing. That's already current law to allow that. And I don't think it's been an issue before with anyone abusing it.
You have a follow-up?
So with this particular bill, with that, we're just putting the parameters for them being able to vote electronically or participate electronically is what this is doing?
Leader Camper?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, and only under, like I said, it's got to be dire circumstances that they're not there. We've seen where people have been injured, falling down the stairs, something has happened. They have to be in rehab. They can't get out, but they still want to serve. They still want to be there. And I think with, modern times, as technology has went on, this is something that's an option for people to be able to still participate. Thank you for your question.
Representative Love?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Leader, thank you for bringing the bill. From what I'm reading in section 1, subsection C of the amendment and number 3, it looks like it outlines the provisions under which a person may be able to participate. For example, letter I says, if you're out of the country due to work, you can only participate in this means 2 times per year. If you're sick and the doctor has advised you not to appear in person, you can only do that 6 times per year. If you have a family emergency, you can only do that 2 times. So it looks like you put parameters in there to keep someone from just not attending the meetings, but have to have a reason. And also there are restrictions on the number of times. Like my niece is a school board member. And I know that in Nashville, they have a lot of board meetings. And so when you're talking about 2 times a year or 6 times a year, that's out of 12 months. You're not really talking about, in my estimation, if you have this situation, and I would hope that we would believe that people would not exaggerate a family emergency or sickness or being out of town just to avoid a meeting that you've been duly elected for. So I appreciate you bringing the legislation.
Leader Camper?
Thank you for your comments. You are right, except we're going to amend it down from 6 to the 3, but the other numbers were right.
Thank you. Let's go to Chairman Sapicki.
And thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the language of not more than will still be in the bill. So when it goes not more than 3 on those particular ones that were 6, those will still apply. And also a board can adopt the policy not to do this.
Leader?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you. Members, that's all the comments I had lined up. Any objection to the question? No objection. So okay, all those in favor of House Bill 1324 moving out to county rules indicate by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee, for those that work with me on this. I really appreciate it. I appreciate your input. Thanks so much.
Thank you. And once again, I appreciate you working with all parties till we could come to a good bill. Members, item number 4 on your calendar, House Bill 826 by Representative Gillespie. You got a motion and a second, sir.
Thank you, Chairman. I hope it's okay to present from here.
It is.
All right. Thank you so much. Members, this is a school safety bill, and I have an amendment 4977. Is that already on there?
No, it is not, and it does rewrite the bill. So with that objection, members, can we add this amendment? Do I have a motion and a second? Okay, I have motion second. Without objection, we're going to add amendment 4977 to the 826 for proper discussion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, your amendment's on. You may explain.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. This bill addresses an issue raised in certain cases about students that are involved in acts of violence off campus. The current law addresses an act of violence or threatened violence or threats of safety, and it leads them to be able to, the school director, the principal, to be able to send them to an alternative school. What this bill as amendment would do would be if there's certain situations, and I'll give an example of that if needed. If certain circumstances happen off campus and the principal or the school director believes that having those students back on the campus for the alternative school would provide further violence, this will allow them to have a off-campus virtual alternative school. And with that, I welcome any questions.
Okay, Chairman Spicky.
I love the bill. Just going to ask a question on this. If we have a student that falls into this category, is there anything, or maybe it's a bill we may have to run in the future that addresses that if you're going to take this action, that a mental health screening should be done on the child with the permission of the parents?
Representative Gillespie.
I do not believe that this current bill addresses that, although I would hope that in these circumstances that principal or school director would make those connections. But I would look forward to working with you in the future to implement something like that and provide funding for it as well.
Very good comment and a catch on that, Chairman Sapicki. Representative Gant, Leader Gant.
Thank you, Chairman. To the sponsor, does the student have to be expelled?
Representative Gillespie.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. No, it's my understanding that this would be the before that would take place, or in hopes that it would not take place. But they can eventually, yes.
Legals tell me that if they are suspended for more than 10 days or expelled, it's in the body of the amendment.
So the answer to my question is yes, they have to be expelled. Okay. All right.
Would you like for legal to weigh in on this for you?
No, it's fine. I think I understand. So what are the qualifications and who makes the determination if that student goes to that virtual school application?
Representative Gillespie.
Thank you. In section 1, part B, it just says the director of schools or the director's designee determines that assigning the student to alternative school or alternative program may endanger the safety of the student or staff of the alternative school or alternative program. So they have to believe that there's something, they have to have evidence of some act or potential act, and then they would make that decision.
Representative Gant,
Okay, let me rephrase. Who is they?
you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The director of schools or the director's designee.
Recognize.
So does that come at the request of the teacher that has supervised that behavior?
Representative Gillespie.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just one second. Do you mind if we have legal? There's some parts of this.
Yes, without objection, we're out of session. Recognize legal.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Katie Robertson, Office of Legal Services. TCA Section 496-3401 lays out different violations in which a student may be suspended from school. If it's more than 10 days, then there's a panel who looks at that. Once it's determined that the student is suspended and for the amount of days, then it's looked at if they can attend alternative school or if they're required to attend alternative school.
Question of legal while we're out of session, Representative Gant. Any questions of legal? Without objection, we're back in session. Representative Gant.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That answers my question. I just wanted to understand the protocol, that where it starts and where it ends, and I think I've got that answered. So thank you.
Thank you. Members, further questions of the sponsor of the bill? Seeing none, any objections to the question being called? Without objection, all those in favor of moving House Bill 826 out of calendar rules indicate by saying aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you. Item number 5, House Bill 250 by Chairman Haston. You have a motion and a second. You're recognized.
Thank you. And do we still need to put the amendment on? Okay.
Yeah, we do. Members, look at amendment. Why don't you go ahead and give us the amendment, make sure
I believe it's 4471.
That is correct. We have a motion and a second, rewrites the bill. Any objection to adding it to the bill for proper discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of adding the amendment indicate by saying aye. The ayes have it. Noes, the ayes have it. Jumped over that. You're now back on your bill, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This bill would extend the Tennessee Work Ready Opportunity Program that the General Assembly passed back in 2021. This bill makes available the ability for each high school senior in Tennessee to take a nationally recognized career readiness assessment at no cost to the student or the district. And with that, I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Members, discussion on Chairman Hastings' explanation. Chairman Reagan. Motion's been called. Any objection? Hearing none, all those in favor of moving House Bill 250 out to finance indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? The ayes have it. Moves out. Chairman Haston, you also have item number 6, House Bill 251. You have a motion and a second. I don't see any amendments on that one. You're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We all know how it's hard for school districts to find teachers, especially in special education. This legislation would create the Tennessee Special Educator Scholarship, a scholarship that would provide financial support to eligible special education assistants, which would help them then pursue teaching careers in special education. With that, I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Members, questions of the sponsor? Chairman Sapicki?
Just a point for clarification. Is there anything in there that requires them to teach in Tennessee, or is it any kind of clawbacks if they don't move forward with their degrees?
Recognize Chairman Haston.
Thank you. Thank you for the question. Yes, the individual must agree to work full-time as a special education teacher in Tennessee for at least 3 consecutive years following graduation. Thank you for the question.
Further questions on House Bill 251? Chairman Reagan? Question's been called for. All those in favor of moving House Bill 251 out to GovOps indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Committee.
Thank you. Members, item number 7, I have that bill, so I'm going to release the gavel over to Vice Chair William Slater, and I'm going to approach the podium and step out of the chairman's.
All right, members, item number 7, House Bill 433, and by Chairman White. And you'll remember that we had some discussion on this last time, and we do have some folks that are ready to answer some questions. Motion properly seconded. Chairman White, you are recognized.
Thank you, Chairman. I would like to ask what status we on. We have 2 amendments here. Well, we have 1 amendment. Is Amendment 5095 already added to the bill from last week?
It is added, and that does rewrite the bill.
Okay, so I can just go ahead and explain the bill. Members, this is the bill that I told you last week was given to me by Senator Gardenhire. You remember a couple years ago, we passed the ESA bill or the voucher bill. It was tied up in court for 2 years. The Supreme Court decided about 8 months ago, and it was released and started moving forward, but it only applied to Davidson and Shelby counties. This particular bill is asking that the counties of Hamilton and Knox County be added only. It is the sponsor's wish in the Senate that we don't do anything else other than that. He made a promise that he's one of these 2 counties, and they were asked, so we stop right there. It won't go any further moving forward on the floor. So it's just asking these 2 counties be added to the ESA. And that's what we're trying to do on this particular bill. Now, I know if we have any questions about history on the ESA, we're welcome. So, Chairman.
Thank you, Chairman White. And we do have some folks that have some questions. I'd remind us that we do have some folks that are ready to testify. We also have another amendment to consider as well. Chairman Sapicki, did you want to ask your question now, or was it a little bit later? All right, thank you. You're recognized then, Chairman Sapicki.
And Mr. Chairman, I'll leave it up to whoever wants to answer this question. Could be legal, doesn't matter to me. This bill is about adding Knox County and Hamilton County to the original ESA bill that we passed multiple years ago. Is that correct?
Sponsor, you're recognized.
That is 100% correct.
Chairman Sapicki.
And this might be for the sponsor. Is there anything in your bill that is changing what was passed a couple years ago in regards to ESA on how it's going to be administered, or the caps are changing? Nothing like that is changing. We're just adding 2 counties to the program, correct?
Again, 100% correct.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Representative McKenzie, did you have a question for the sponsor?
Yes, and it's along those lines, along the same lines that I like to be 100% correct as well. Is it correct that the goal of the original bill was to have a pilot project in Shelby and Davidson County?
Sponsor?
No, not that I remember. Now, Mr. Chairman, I would like to request, we got some speakers that can address that, kind of gives a little bit of history. You might want to address that. So maybe to answer that, I would like to maybe request that we go out of session and let those speakers address that.
Okay, and any objection to going out of session? All right, we are out of session, and we have on the list from the Department of Education, Bill Dunn, from the Governor's Office, Brent Easley, and from TEA, Jim Rye. And so I'm going to ask all 3 if you would come up and take your places, and give you just a couple of minutes each, 2 minutes each, for some opening comments if you have them. And then we'll be able to, the committee will be able to ask questions as they come up. Yes.
In the form that the speakers, that the people coming to speak have to fill out. Is there something in there that asks them for pro or con?
Yes.
We know going into this ahead of time on the statements we're going to hear, is it in support of the bill or in opposition?
Yes, and when they filled out their forms, Bill Dunn from the Department of Education is speaking in support of the bill. Brent Easley from the Office of the Governor in support of the bill. And then Jim Rye from the TEA is in opposition to the bill. Thank you. All right, and with that, we'll go ahead and we'll start with any opening statements from Mr. Dunn. I'll take them in the order that I have them here. Mr. Dunn?
Thank you, Mr. Is that on? Thank you,
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, and please excuse me, I'm a little nervous. I'm used to being up there, but I am excited to talk about school choice and the opportunities for students. And I think as we go through this, you'll see why the governor is very excited about this and why he thinks this will push Tennessee forward when it comes to helping our children. And I talked to the chairman ahead of time that I was going to cover a little bit about just school choice and the philosophy. I know we've got a lot of new members on this committee, and I think it will help you better understand the philosophy and why this is a good path forward. School choice is not something new. Many of y'all have heard of the GI Bill. My father is a World War II veteran, and he never saw combat. He, according to my dad, when the Japanese heard Paul Dunn joined the Navy, they surrendered. So he never had to actually fight, but he did qualify for the GI Bill. And when I knew that I was going to be talking to you today, I took the opportunity over Easter lunch to talk to him about how did you decide where to go? He was from Rhode Island, and he said, well, I really had just two options. And one was Rhode Island State. If I went there, I'd have to do business. But if I went to Providence College, which was the private school, it'd give me the opportunity to go to law school. And because the GI Bill said, while these are public dollars, they could be used at a private school or a public school, it gave my dad the opportunity to follow the career path that he wanted to, as opposed to what was mandated because there were restrictions on how he would spend the money. In addition to this, at the federal level, we're probably all very familiar with the Pell Grants, which work very similarly. They are education funds, public funds, that are giving to deserving students who could then choose the college or university that they want to attend. And so the money follows the child, and the family and the student gets to decide what is the best path forward for me. What is the best educational environment? Here in Tennessee, this is not a new idea. Over 16 years ago, the General Assembly passed the Hope Scholarship. Same philosophy, school choice. Educational dollars giving to students and families to decide what is best for them. And I was here during the debate where some people said it should only go to public colleges and universities. But luckily, the General Assembly said, no, we should open it up to give more opportunities for students to find the path forward for them. And so as a, and I really like for you to kind of focus on the Hope Scholarships. I know the ESA, sometimes we get emotional, we don't understand them, you fear change, but I think people are very comfortable with the Hope Scholarship so they can better understand what's going on. And I looked up to see what would be the difference if 16 some years ago we had decided only these public dollars could only go to public schools. And here in Davidson County, and Representative Love has left, and he can correct me, I may not get this right, but it seems to me the public university colleges here in Davidson County would be Tennessee State University or Nashville State Community College. So if we had restricted it only to public schools, that would be your option in Davidson County. Because we allow the family to choose their education choices, what's added is Trevecca, Nazarene, Vanderbilt, South College, Lipscomb, Fisk, and Belmont. So I think most of you would recognize some of these names and would understand their philosophies and how they bring different things to the table, and that by having the option to go to more than just two schools, it really opens the path and the future for these students. But a couple years ago, as the sponsor has mentioned, we did pass the ESA, which is a school choice program, which allows the dollars to follow the child to the school of their choice. And it's it has just started, so of course a study has not happened yet. But going back to the Hope Scholarship, I don't know if anybody's done a study, but I know one thing as a legislator, sometimes you look for things to say if something's working. And ever since we passed the law that said you can use these monies for public or private schools, I cannot think of a single bill that was passed to undo it.
Mr. Dunn.
It's got to be working. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And I think you've yielded some of your time from, I think Mr. Easley has yielded some of your time in support of the bill. Thank you, though, Mr. Dunn. And we go now to Mr. Rye.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Testified today. I heard some things last week in testimony. I wanted to go over a couple of things. First off, and appreciate Bill Dunn talking about it.
Mr. Rye, could
Yes,
you, I'm sorry.
Did I not give my name? And
You didn't, and I forgot to remind you of that, so
that's
thank
right.
you.
Jim Rye, Tennessee Education Association. Just to remind Bill Dunn that there is MTSU and APSU here available for Hope Scholarships as far as public institutions. But a couple of things I saw last week I wanted to go to. First off is the issue of cost, right? So it's kind of apples and oranges when it comes to the Hope Scholarship, which is generated solely by the state in the lottery, and how we fund public education in Tennessee. So I want you to the cost about that came up last week. So let's just take the TISA formula first and foremost. That's a 70-30 split. So on average, 30% of all the dollars in that TISA stack comes from local coffers. These are places from your homes. You've raised property taxes to develop these. These are local dollars, not just generated by something like the lottery or the state. Now, the issue about increased costs for your local governments is this. If you look at voucher programs in other states, that the vast majority of those students, and this is clear in the data, the vast majority of those students would never have attended a public school. So these are new costs. Now, in the issue of the way the law is set up, let's take Hamilton County, for example. Hamilton County is on the state line. Often, as all of you have been in many places in East Ridge and so on, you don't really know you've gone into another state in many of the neighborhoods. Now, all you have to do is move down the street from Georgia to Tennessee, and all of those children, if you're in the income brackets, now qualify for the voucher. Now, in Hamilton County's case, that's 35% of the TISA dollars. For every new student that would not have attended a public school, local coffers have to pay 35%. So start running the numbers on this. I mean, if we think that this is cost-free, the data and the simple math don't back it up for local costs. So in the issue, let's say you have 1,000 students and the local costs of Hamilton County are running, about $2,500, and you have 1,000 students, it's 2.5 million that you need to come up with new local dollars. So a cost, especially when you look at what students that were not going to public schools, these are new costs. So I heard that last week. And we look at, especially when you're close to a state line, that we are going to, that there is clearly an opportunity for more students that have never gone to public schools, and these are new costs. The second issue I heard last week was outcomes, right? Because, we talk about it's really important. Well, are voucher students better off? Now, I will say to this, for those of us that have been trained in understanding research, what is valid research, what we understand for true models, I would say that it points to no. Now, there is a lot of things that are thrown out there. You can pull a stack of quote unquote research papers. Oh, they're working great. I think that peer-reviewed journals and what we've seen out of major studies indicate no. I'm just going to point to.
And I think
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Wright. I
Was that
think
3
some-
minutes?
It was more.
Oh, well then,
actually-
geez, I should
we-
have
we
timed
gave-
myself. Thank
Yes,
you very
no,
much.
we gave you a little attitude there.
Very good. Appreciate
But
it, Mr.
I think
Chairman.
some of the questions may have to do with some of the things that you might be addressing. So
Very good.
at this
Thank you, Mr.
point, questions and let's see, Representative Gant.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Representative White, as well. Last week, we had, discussion about this and how it affected my district in Fayette County, and I did meet this week with Assistant Commissioner Bill Dunn, former colleague here, and we had a very good discussion, and I appreciate him coming to my office and sitting down and discussing, our differences and so forth. And so I guess my other second part of a question that I would have would be, and this may go back to Representative Mark White, and we can do this at a different time if we need to. If next year I wanted to bring Fayette County into this equation, would that be a problem?
Did you want to direct it to any of our guests since we're out of session? or-
Whoever wants to win that lottery of the question, so.
If not, okay, would Mr. Easley? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Brent Easley, Governor's Legislative Director. From our perspective, no, sir. That's legislative prerogative on districts that would be added here, just as this bill would be. And so that's something we would defer to the legislature on, and our administration is absolutely supportive of school choice.
Mr. Rye, did you want to address that question as well, or no?
Yeah, and I appreciate the question, Representative Gant. Knowing where Fayette County is, right on the proximity of Mississippi, on the Mississippi border, that it's clear it'd be helpful to really understand exactly how many new students would be moving across the border, and then understanding what are the new costs to Fayette County, because Fayette County does pay a portion of the TISA dollars that will fund every voucher. And so I think it would be helpful, and, and not to say Fayette County's, always cash strapped, but nobody wants to raise property taxes. Nobody wants to raise a wheel tax. And for a lot of things that have happened in Fayette County about trying to build new schools, trying to maintain what you have now, it's a very cash strapped local government, and they try to keep taxes low. And I think that that's a very good local decision. When I look at Fayette County and its geography, and realizing that on day one, a family moves, could be 20 miles, 10 miles, could be 2 miles across the state line into Fayette County for whatever purpose. All of those children in that family now qualify and are on the local coffers of the taxpayer dollar. And I think that's really important as we think about these things, what the local dollar impact is, because it's not just state dollars from the lottery. These are local dollars. I mean, the state of Tennessee relies more on local dollars to fund public education than our neighboring states, right? So our state government is a minority funder of education, whereas in Alabama, the state picks up 57%, and in Kentucky, the state picks up 58%. Right now, the state of Tennessee, even with the new TISA dollars, are just under 50%. That's moved up from 48% 2 years ago, right? So you have to start really looking at what your local dollar impact is on that county. And I think for everybody, as we think about this, because as we're now talking about expanding, whether it's Knox or whether it's in Hamilton, to really have that understanding of what those local dollars are, right? And that really comes down to good faith estimates about how many students that we're going to pay for that are not part of the public education system or never would be part of the public education system. That is a good faith effort in the finances.
Any follow-up, Representative Gant? Go ahead.
Thank you,
You're
Chairman.
recognized.
If Fayette County were to elect to come into the ESA program, would that not lower the child teacher student ratio to be more economically in bounds with a revised TISA formula?
You Is
Yes.
that directed? Thank you, Representative Gann. Sorry, and Representative McKenzie, sometimes you slide over and I see. It's all right. Appreciate you. Well, again, I would reiterate, right, that I think that you can actually think about, so here's the concept that you're talking about. How many students will leave the Fayette County school system to go to a private school? My inclination is not many, right? That you won't have a reduction in, see, this is the issue that when I show you what happened in other states, that the vast majority of the kids that take the voucher were never going to public schools. These are the new dollars that we're talking about coming out of the coffers, right? So, so that I would not expect a mass exodus out of Fayette County schools because that's not what's happened in other states, right? And so the idea, the whole concept of vouchers is kids trapped in public schools provides an option, they leave. The reality of what we've seen in other states across the nation that have already done this is kids never going to public schools now get the voucher and it's paid out of local dollars where local dollars are. Now, to be clear, in all of these issues that we've had year after year on this, the state could have set up its own separate sort of voucher fund that did not tap local dollars. That was always an option, sort of like what we have for the charter schools, and they have a state-funded facilities, right? So it's a separate thing. We fund it every year, and it could have been done. But when we're talking about vouchers as it is now, it's very important for everybody on this panel to understand we are talking about local dollars, new dollars that will be needed to fund this. That's what I was hearing last week, and I wanted to make sure everybody understood that. So I don't see class sizes getting less in Fayette County. I don't see, but what I do see are new increased costs for Fayette County. I do believe that that is easily provable.
Representative Gamp?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to thank the panel, thank the committee, thank the chairman and Chairman White for having the proper debate here. I mean, this is why we're here, and this is how we get things done in the General Assembly, by having a civil debate like this. So thank you.
Thank you, Representative Gant. Representative McKenzie, a question while we're out of session?
Yes, Mr. Chair. To the staff from the governor's office, and so I say it generally, so just to both of you. Are you all really comparing higher ed to K-12 education? And if so, why?
You're recognized.
Thank you. What we're trying to do is show how a program works, how school choice works. And so that's why we are doing this, because if they're not brothers and sisters, they're at least cousins, that basically you've got educational dollars following the students. And I'd like to remind this committee that as we try to divide these kids and families up into private school kids or public school kids, they are all Tennessee students. And if we really talk about cost increase, just think if all the private schools suddenly said, okay, we're not going to educate anymore. Can you imagine what the fiscal note would be for the state of Tennessee if the taxpayers had to pick up the total tab? We should thank people who are willing to go out there and use their time, talent, and treasure to put kids first and help them. And so I don't think there's anything wrong with the state saying, appreciate what you're doing, and there are some kids who would do better in the environment that you have, and we're going to give them the opportunity.
Representative McKenzie?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And, I hear what you're saying, but, making that comparison when, K-12 education, then we spend a lot of time in K-12 education. You're dealing with IEPs. You're dealing with, there's weighting factors. TISA is there for a reason. There's weighting factors for rural. There's weighting factors for, special ed. None of that exists in higher ed because it's different. It's totally different. And higher ed's voluntary too, in terms of who attends. So I push back vigorously against that comparison, and it's apples to oranges. The sponsor said that he didn't think this was a pilot program could you let me know? I'm looking at the name of the program. Is this a pilot program? So let me ask this, and I'll be done, Chair. Is it a pilot program? And if the answer is yes, aren't pilot programs meant to be created to give us some data and in a controlled environment, in a small controlled environment, so that we can say whether it's thumbs up, thumbs down, and whether it can be expanded into other areas? Isn't that the whole point and purpose of a pilot program? So that's two questions. One's a yes, no, and then the other one, please elaborate.
Mr. Easley?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, Representative, it is titled in statute a pilot program, and it does in statute do some of the things that you just mentioned. There is a parent survey that would be issued annually. There is a study of sorts by the department. Also, the comptroller can audit the program. So we will see those data points. And the students that participate in the program will also be taking the TCAP test. So we will see those data points that I believe answer your question.
Mr. Dunn?
Yeah, and to follow up on your original question about the difference between higher ed and K-12, a huge difference is that with K-12, it's mandatory schooling. If you don't send your child to school, there are legal consequences. In higher ed, those students and those parents have the option of, no, I'm not going. After I was first elected, I remember one of the first calls I got was from a mother whose child was being bullied on the school bus, and she was getting no help from the school. And she said, Representative Dunn, what am I supposed to do? And she didn't have the option of, I'm not sending my kid on that bus anymore. So I think really when we talk about school choice, K through 12 makes more sense because we are mandating that child to be in a school. So why don't we give them more options as opposed to higher ed where they don't have to go? They had the option of doing something different.
Thank you. Next on the list, I have Representative Ritchie, and is that for while we're out of session? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. And who possibly answer on this? You'd reference as far as for somebody moving across the state line and then being eligible. I think under the current the program, they have to be in the current school system for a year.
Unless they are attending a Tennessee school for the first time. So that is an incoming kindergartner or somebody moving from out of state.
Okay, so the folks moving across is going to be different. Anybody else that's already inside of the state is still going to have that parameter as well as having the income threshold. So it's not going to be like a wide open door. Everybody can end up coming in based off how it's set up.
Correct. So it's a 200% poverty. But to be clear, in the state line proximity is a good point. I appreciate that. But also to any kindergartner moving forward, right? So that any person attending a Tennessee school for the first time.
Thank you. And Representative Baum, I think I skipped over you. I apologize for that.
Thank you, Chairman Slater. I wanted to ask a question or two to Mr. Rye about cost. You mentioned a moment ago that you thought vouchers would cost locals more. And I was thinking maybe it's the opposite. Maybe vouchers would save locals money. And I think the reason is capital projects. And maybe that's just a fancy word for the cost of building a school. The locals currently pay 100% of the cost of building schools. I'm going to use Rutherford County as an example. I know it's not in this bill. Rutherford County is a growing county. We're adding 1,000 or more new students per year to our school system. And so if a high school holds about 1,000 students, that means Rutherford County needs to build about one new school per year. A high school might cost $120 to $150 million. A middle school might be $100 to $120 million. An elementary school might be 75 or 80 million. If we have 1,000 students in a county, like Knox County or Hamilton County or even Rutherford County, take a voucher and go to a private school, then that would essentially save the cost of a school. For Rutherford County, it would mean avoiding building a $120 million high school. So wouldn't that save the LEA money because they're going to be needing to pay the local portion of this TISA funding formula under either scenario? But if a portion of these students take the voucher and go elsewhere, then the locals can avoid building one of these big, expensive new schools.
Appreciate that, Representative Baum. I want to impress upon the point, I understand exactly what you're saying. But if we take, for example, Indiana, where the surveys show 90% of the students that are taking the voucher now in that state would have not gone to a public school. And you do have thousands of students in Rutherford County at the moment going to private schools, even those that are in the income level, right? That is in the parameters of the law, right? Start to think about in terms that you'll be paying now for many of those families that are sending their children to the private schools in Rutherford County as a new cost rather than students leaving Rutherford County, which is a fantastic school system. And by the way, seeing some of the new school buildings, who wants to leave that? They're fabulous buildings. But you start to think about how Rutherford County taxpayers will be subsidizing the current private school structure in Rutherford County. I think that that's a very important frame. And there's actually math that we can get down to it too. I mean, if we start to really think about the math of this, right, where we can look at other data points in other states about are these students that were leaving our public schools, i.e. then saving on capital costs, or are we subsidizing an existing private school structure of which local coffers need to pay a substantial portion? Now, that is what we're talking about here. And this is one of the best, and I appreciated what Representative Gantz said too. This has been one of the best vettings of this cost idea, that it is just, it's neutral or we save, rather than are we now going to subsidize new students that we haven't paid. And the reason why I really drill into this too is, again, Tennessee ranks in the bottom 10 in funding per student. Now, we get a lot of bang for our buck out of that, but we are still well below even our neighbors like Kentucky and Alabama in funding per student. So every dollar is precious and is used, I believe, exceptionally well, right? If we are going to bring more costs into that are new costs, right, that the coffers, that the local taxpayers have to pay, I believe that it has an impact, and it's important for everybody to understand what that is and going through, but I appreciate the question.
Representative Baum, follow up.
Thank you, Chairman Slater. Okay, so I think that we've established that if students take the vouchers or the ESAs and go to a different type of school, that the LEA saves the capital cost of building a new school. And just by the way, Rutherford County needs to build 3 new schools this year, and it's only got enough money for 2 of the 3, and they don't know what they're going to do for the students who aren't going to have a place to go. ESAs might help Rutherford County right now. But I want to talk about really more of the content of your last response, and that is that these local school districts are going to have to provide funding for the vouchers in a way that they otherwise weren't. I guess what I would like to suggest is that the LEA would have to fund these students' education, the local portion of TISA, whether they take the voucher or not. Because in order for students to be eligible for the voucher, or the ESA, they have to have been in the public school system. I think we've kind of established that already, and I remember that because I voted on the legislation 4 years ago. I voted in favor of it. So the locals are going to have to pay for that student whether they stay within the public school system or whether they take the ESA and go to a different school. So that's a wash. You mentioned kindergartners. Kindergartners will not have been in a public school the prior year because they're entering school for the first time. But even there, if a new 5-year-old student or 6-year-old student is entering kindergarten, the LEA is going to have to pay the local portion of TISA for that student, whether they enter a kindergarten in the public school system or whether they take a voucher or an ESA and go to a different school. So I don't see how that's also a wash.
Well, if I could, and you could ask legal about this too when we go back into session or so on. I don't mean to speak for you, Katie Potter, but the law is clear that if you're attending a Tennessee school for the first time, right? They are all eligible. And we're talking about this law and moving forward, right? So that if you have a 5-year-old in Rutherford County and their parents were going to send them to a church school down the road that would be eligible, category 3 or a category 4 school, then, and they're in the income level, but they were never going to go to public school, that is a new cost. All right, just to be clear on that. I mean, there is easy avenues to understand what new costs are. But the thing is as we're talking about it now, there is a way to actually calculate this. And what I have done and when we look at this as a data point is that we look at the experience of other states, because this law goes on, we've talked about it as a pilot, but there's no sunset on this law, right? This is moving on ad infinitum. And I believe clearly that you can demonstrate that there are new costs to the county taxpayer, because that the idea of it has always been spoken in these things is students leaving public schools, that is the generator, that is the only people that take advantage of this. And sometimes that was framed in ways that I found, I don't know, not truthful, trapped, or, these things. And I appreciate, it always breaks my heart if I hear a student being bullied in any situation, whether it's a private school or public school, right? It's a terrible thing. But the idea that that most of the people taking these vouchers will leave public schools and that will be a savings, we won't have the money on top of whatever the TISA and the capital costs and so on, I don't believe bears up to what the experience has been in other states.
And I know that a lot of people have questions, so I'll just conclude with a brief comment, kind of summarize. I think that the ESA program saves LEAs capital costs. And I think LEAs are going to be paying the local portion of TISA for each student in that district, whether they take that money and go to a private school with an ESA or whether they stay in the public school.
Mr. Chairman, always fascinating to actually have a discussion with an economics professor. So I appreciate that, Dr. Bond.
Mr. Dunn, did you have a response?
Yes, I appreciate it because several times it's been brought up with what other states have experienced. And I'm going to be totally honest with you on some of the research in other states. When Governor Haslam first brought this idea forward, he wanted to only do it if there were positive results. And I remember being in the room where he had some folks who had done this research on school choice in the room and some on the phone. And he asked the hard questions. At the end of that phone call, all the research, I think there were 14 studies up until then, when it came to academics, because remember, that's really about what you study. In all cases at that time, there were no negatives from the vouchers. There were positives, but they might have been minor. Since that time, there have been other studies. Louisiana did a horrible job of rolling out. They had a hurricane. They had schools destroyed. They suddenly just came up with a voucher program. So yes, there are studies if a state does it the wrong way academically. But remember, when you see about how an effect a program will have, government is good at maybe looking at academic achievement, but there's so much more to that. And the analogy I like to use is when it comes to restaurants, government's real good about going in and measuring whether the chicken is at the right temperature or whether a cleaning supply is put in the right cabinet. And they can give you a score of a 97 or 100. But the things that they can't really tell you at that restaurant is the food good? Is the service good? How's the atmosphere? So I think when we look at these studies, there's a lot more than just the academic, which is very important. But there are other things. And this is where we let the parents and the students decide, this is what's important to me. And in these studies, and I tried to look up a bunch of these, and that's why I'm trying to be honest with you, that there academically, there are some studies out there that show. But the studies that looked at how does this affect the academics of the public schools Everyone I found this weekend, there might be another one out there, but everyone I found this weekend, and some were from I would consider very less than conservative sources, the public schools improved. They improved with the competition. And I remember talking to a former teacher from Florida when school choice moved in there, and he was telling me, boy, when that came, our principal told us, you get to know the parents, you know their names, and you're going to be contacting them. Suddenly, they had to really be involved with the kids and the parents because of it. So these studies are showing that the public schools actually improve with the competition. And so when you talk about dollars, if you've got 400 kids, 500 kids this year taking these and going, but yet the 50,000 kids who are still in the public school, there's an improvement because they're saying we don't want to lose any more kids. Boy, you talk about leverage of dollars there. Thank you.
Thank you. And members, I'll remind us that we did come back this week so that we could have these questions and have this discussion, and I appreciate it. We're still out of session. I have a few on the list. I just want to make sure that those that are on the list, that it is for our guests with us today. So Representative Fritz, you are the next person on the list. You're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you all for the conversation. I think there's a difference, just for the comment, in the fiscal note and the fully burdened cost of education. And I think the fully burdened cost of education probably takes into conversations that we won't have time for today. But I will just ask this simple question. We mentioned that we were 10th in spending per student, and so I'll ask both parties on this issue. What is ideal? If 10th is not ideal, what is ideal in your opinion? Thank you.
Representative Fritz, I said bottom 10.
Mr. Rye.
Sorry.
Go ahead. You're recognized. Thank you. Need to be careful not to have a running debate, and that's members as well. Thank you.
I am terribly sorry, Mr. Chairman. I just bottom 10. Right now, we rank, I believe this year, 43rd in the nation in funding per student. I'd like to see Tennessee to be at the Southeast average. I think that's, economics and costs. I mean, we don't need to be at the top end like Massachusetts. In order to get Massachusetts level funding per student, we need another $4.5 billion this year alone. It's not practical, and our costs of living are not the same. But if we compare ourselves with, I always use our comparisons, Kentucky and Alabama. I think that's a fair thing about funding per student. And in order to meet Alabama with this year with their increase as well, we need about an additional $900 million in state dollars alone. In Kentucky, we need about $1.8 billion, right? So just why are they so much more than us? And there's historic reasons. But I think that's right. And when we think about what we could do with that increased money, we talk about, appreciated the governor talking about coming up with $140 million for an SRO in every school. It's a very good thing, but we were able to generate it just like that. Well, we should be able to generate enough money to make sure we have a school nurse. We should have it. I'm sure the money is there, and that's the kind of things that we could do if we were at the Southeast average, or at least trying to keep up with our neighbors on that particular money issue.
Thank you. Mr. Dunn or Mr. Easley, would you like to address Representative Fritz's question?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Great question. I had someone from the department just send me an update. As you all know well, we just put in $1 billion and more and redid the funding formula here to make that student-centered, to focus on need. And I think that conversation around need is the conversation we should have. Are our dollars meeting the need of the students and parents in our state? The update that I just received based on the funding formula change through TISA is that of the southeastern states, Tennessee is ranked second with our base funding at 6860. That doesn't include the weights and all of the direct funding lines that are a part of that as well. But I wanted to share that note while we were here. We are happy to continue the conversation and have proposed in the governor's budget that has been distributed to you all additional investments in education. And I anticipate that we will continue to do that and continue to have that conversation with you as policymakers.
Representative Fritz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you both for those answers. That's helpful. I just think it's a little problematic to base it on a cost per student while we all support taking care of our teachers and increasing what we're doing for the state. To base it just on a number is probably a flawed concept. To apply it to what we need and derive the number from that, I think is better. And that's why the bottom 10th thing concerned me. Thank you all.
Representative Love, did you have a question for our guests?
I did. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Looking at this legislation, I do want to ask this question when we talk about the bottom 10% and priority schools, and how even if with competition, the public schools will increase and improve. Even with improvement of public schools, our measure of performance always factors in that there will be a bottom 10%. Is that correct?
Mr. Easley,
Yes, sir.
Representative Love?
So with that already being baked in, even if a school increases to a level to where it would not be in what is now the bottom 10% of all schools, at some point, someone's going to be in the bottom 10% and be subject to having students who can then have school vouchers to have that choice, correct?
Mr. Easley?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The way that the program is structured now is a district-wide, county-wide structure. So the framework for eligible districts is laid out in the statute. So with this structure, that's not a moving target.
Representative Love?
The two districts or two counties now that are participating in the ESAs, if those schools and those districts improve in such a manner that they are no longer in the bottom 10%, there will still be a bottom 10% somewhere in the state. At which point, if we expand the ESAs, don't those counties that are getting the expansion possibly then qualify to be in the bottom 10%, or would other counties be in the bottom 10%?
Mr. Easley?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If the districts that had schools in the bottom 10% changed, the way that the law is structured would not rotate districts in and out because it is based on historical data.
Representative Love?
Thinking, and just maybe two more, Mr. Chairman, I apologize. 'Cause this is actually what I was trying to get to several years back, is that we have a perpetual bottom 10%. And even though all our schools may improve, it's baked into the system that somebody's always going to be priority, even if they may be ranked higher than some schools in other states. And it does a disservice, I think, to parents and students when we bake into the system. Because I remember I had well, let me not give a speech, I'll just ask the question. If the schools all improve and get to a high achieving level, do we stop the ESA program?
Mr. Easley?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for the question. It is possible and would be a great outcome if school improvement happened and parental choice happened.
Follow up or?
Just, this is my last one. So is the ESA program designed to ever come to an end?
Mr. Easley?
Thank you for the question. It is not in the current law.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. And Chairman Haston?
Thank you. I'll be brief. I know everybody's ready to move on to this bill. And I'll just preface this by saying I am not an economics expert. I did get a B- in macroeconomics at Indiana University. Shout out to the Hoosiers. But I will just say this, the booming counties with a lot of extra money that are coming in. It's great to have that problem to be a booming county like Rutherford County with a lot of incoming tax dollars. Those counties like that would save some money on capital improvements. But I think it's just fair to note that the smaller rural communities, counties that don't have that booming influx of people coming in and a booming influx of tax dollars, they're not going to be saving money on the other end of the spectrum. They're not going to save money on capital improvements. They're concerned about losing 5 students and you lose a teacher. And so I just think that it's fair to note that on both ends of the spectrum. Thanks.
Thank you, Chairman Haston. All right, I don't see anyone else on the list, so without objection, we'll go back into session. Thank you so much, panelists. We appreciate
Thank you, Mr.
coming
Chairman and
today. Thank
committee.
you. All right. Chairman Sapicki, you're recognized.
Just want to clarify a couple things here. Simple mathematics, and my colleague from Rutherford County will probably appreciate this. Simple mathematics. In Murray County right now, this year, in a couple of months, we're going to graduate 720 seniors that are already being funded by the schools right now, already being funded. Unless we have more than 720 new students into our school system, there's no additional cost to the system because they already budgeted for them, for those seniors to graduate. And until we have an increase of over 720, would there be any new increase to the district? So that's just simple mathematics. So even if students are leaving in the ESA program, unless that number of those and new students is greater than the ones who have already left, there's no cost to the district because the monies are already baked into the budget. We've been talking for X amount of time now. The question is, and the question was brought up last week that nobody re-asked it. Enable for us to figure out if the ESA program is working for our students. Somebody made the comment that there weren't enough students in the ESA program to give us good data. One of the ways to get better data is to have an opportunity for more students to take advantage of it so we can get to our data quicker, because in the ESA bill we passed, and most of us were sitting in here during that debate, that for the first 3 fiscal years of the ESA program, if a student leaves, that district is made whole for an imaginary student that's not even in their classroom. So that we could gather the data so that we would know that when this time period is over, we can make a logical decision of, does it work? And I'm sure that if we're sitting here and we get 3 years from now and this program is not yielding the results we want it to yield, then we'll adjust accordingly. But what if this is a tool in the tool belt that allows students who are in economically disadvantaged neighborhoods that may be at a priority school that has a bad situation, that we can turn their lives around by giving them an opportunity to go somewhere else? There were 2 groups of people testifying up in front of us. The group on our right talked about students and outcomes. The presenter on the left talked about money. Let's think about that. It's about students, student outcomes, and giving our kids the best opportunity to succeed in life, no matter where that is. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Representative Sapicki, and the sponsor is recognized on your bill.
Thank you very much, and I do appreciate this discussion. It brings us back to what we did. I didn't want us to make sure we don't take our eyes off of the original intention of the bill. I remember, like Representative Baum and several of us were on as we drafted the original bill. This is designed for students of lower income and minority students. Students, and this is part of the bill, students must be members of a family with an annual household income that does not exceed the federal income eligibility guidelines for free lunch. So it's intentionally designed for those students in lower incomes where they are in a school that is not performing adequately for them, to give them a chance for an option where their parents or their guardians are not able to give them that. So it is designed for that. And it is not designed also for parents who already have a child in the private school program. And also that was part of it. So it's just for those who have not, and that's open for debate in years to go. But it's a good program, and it's also designed if you have to the chairman from the representative from Davidson County. Regardless, if the bottom 10% keeps coming up, the guys were eons away from that. You know, I hope that continues to happen, but it has to be a district that has 3 or more priority schools or schools in the bottom 10%. So this is intentionally designed to help those students who do not have the options that many other children have that already can have the flexibility of moving around. I think it's a great bill. That's why I agreed to carry that. And these particular 2 counties who want to be included in that, I would support. And with that, I renew the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd remind our members that we do have another amendment to take up. Without objection, do I have a motion so that we can hear that amendment? Motion, properly motion second. And this amendment is from Representative Ritchie. So you are recognized on your amendment.
Thank you, Chairman. And sat down with the sponsor, and one of the things that has been mentioned here today that is extremely important is the amount of data that we get. And when looking at the holdup that we had through the court system, and now we're just now starting to get this in, I sat down with Mr. Dunn earlier or yesterday, and he had mentioned that we've had approximately 2,000 families that have applied since that's come up. So we're just now getting the data. The overall intent of my amendment that I've got, which is drafting code 4412, is not to add 2 counties, but to add the additional 93 counties. I think the best way that we could end up getting all of the data as quickly as possible would be, let's make it all the way across the entire state, instead of going through and kind of cherry picking out specific locations that this would end up working out for. I think if this is something that's good for the goose, it should be good for the gander. And it's something that should be implemented across the entire state, because that's the only way we're really going to get valuable data, not just data from metro areas, but from urban, suburban areas and everything else. I know that after conversations with the sponsor and some of the concerns that the Senate has on this, Chairman, I move to withdraw this amendment at this moment, but I do look forward to working on this next year, and hopefully I can at least get a senator to actually carry the bill, where I didn't get that this year on the other legislation that I'd introduced. So I move to withdraw.
Without objection, the motion is withdrawn. We're back on your bill, Mr. Sponsor. Any questions for the sponsor on the bill? Representative McKenzie.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'd ask you initially if this was a pilot project. So do you mind if I ask you again?
I went back and looked. It does say it is a, let me find it right here again. Public Chapter 506 of the 111 General Assembly was signed into law May 24, and it created an ESA pilot program.
Representative McKenzie.
Thank you for that. And as your expert witnesses testified to, I love data-driven results, and that was you all's purpose. I wasn't on this body. The point and purpose of you having the pilot program is to get results. So he laid out three things, and I think I have them right. Could you talk about the results of the parent program that was a condition of this pilot program? I think it was Mr. Dunn or that maybe Ms. Easy talked about that.
Sponsor, you're recognized.
I don't think I know exactly your question. You want me to talk about, explain what, sir?
Representative McKenzie.
Thank you. So he now go ahead and lay them out. He said that part of the pilot program, so that they could get the data back, that they were going to do 3 things. There was a parent program that they were going to measure the results of. There was going to be surveys associated with the pilot program in Davidson and Shelby, and then the comptroller would audit those the program. So I wanted to know what the results of the audit is, and the survey and the parent program.
Sponsor, you're recognized.
If I'm following you correctly, when we passed this a couple of years ago, it was tied up in court for 2 years. It only came out from the Supreme Court 8 months ago. So we're just into the 8 months, and so we don't have that survey and data.
Representative McKenzie.
Committee, did you listen to what he just said? We don't have the data. We don't have the data. We don't know. whether this is a good thing. We spend a lot of time in our committee saying, we're not New York, we're not Mississippi, we're not out, we're Tennessee, doggone it. And we are. So we created a program, good or bad, we don't know, because we don't have the data. This is a pilot project that just got underway, just now. I'm not saying do away with it, but let's let the pilot program commence. We're 8 months in. I'm sure at the end of the year, you're gonna talk to those couple of thousand parents. We're gonna have, hopefully the comptroller will evaluate its effectiveness, and we're gonna have those surveys. We're gonna get this information. Why expand something that you don't have a clue what if the intended outcome is going to be what we ask? Listen to what he just said. And I'm not trying to beat up on you, Mr. Chair. I'm saying we don't have the data.
Response, sponsor?
Yeah, well, we would have the data if it hadn't been tied up in court, and that's what we're trying to get. These particular two counties have come and said they would like to jump in on this. I've got several quotes here I can read you from happy families of students, if you want me to, I will. But as we move along, this is designed to help those districts. And the reason Knox and Hamilton came to us, they continue to have school systems that are not private schools that are not improving, and so they won't be added. So, like I say, it was tied up in court for 2 years. I wish we was further along, but these two counties want to jump in, and by having 4 counties in 5 years to 2, maybe the data will be even stronger for us.
Chairman Reagan, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Very simple question, Mr. Sponsor. I want to make sure I'm reading this right. The fiscal note on the amendment and the bill, both are not significant. Is that correct, sir?
That is correct, because it's still limited to the original 5,000 was the money. Yeah, that's correct.
So the amendment which expands it also says not significant, correct?
That's correct.
So the hoopla over increased costs and so forth would have been reflected in these notes if that were the case. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Love.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and to the sponsor. If my memory serves me correctly, in the original ESA bill, there were grants made available to the other 93 counties other than Davidson and Shelby. Wasn't there a grant made available to support their educational systems? Or was that taken out the original bill?
Chairman White.
When you say grants, now the original bill was for all 95 counties, and if you remember the debate we had, is that what you're asking? And then it went down to just the 2 counties.
Right, but I believe that, sorry.
Representative Love.
I thought I remember there being funds provided to other counties to keep them from going down into the bottom 10%, if I'm correct, if my memory serves me correctly.
Hold on one second. I need to refresh my memory on that. Which one? Grants, programs for the government. Should I just read this right here?
Chairman White.
I think I need a little help on that one. This is from a quote, funding in the budget was 24 million. Grant program runs for 3 years. The first round of grants will be issued at the end of this year when we have the final total the ESA is used in the first year of implementation. See the award amounts, grant amounts run for 3 years. Yes, sir.
Representative Love.
So, Mr. Chairman, here's my point. Every county but Davidson and Shelby were given opportunity to apply for those grants. And those counties would include Hamilton and Knox. So now what we're saying is Hamilton and Knox will get those grants and Davidson and Shelby won't.
Chairman White.
From what I'm being told, the amount for the reimbursement grant, one more time. The amount for the reimbursement grant was up to 20 million, but with a $5,000 cap.
Representative Love?
Okay, and I was just trying to raise the point that the original bill did not provide for Davidson and Shelby to apply for these grants. Knox and Hamilton I thought I heard somebody saying something, that's why I turned around and stopped. I'm sorry.
Go ahead,
Thank you, sir.
Representative Love.
Thank you. Knox and Hamilton are able to apply for the grant. And now we're expanding, and here's what I'm just asking, will there be parity to allow Shelby and Davidson to apply for the grant? Or will the grants for Hamilton and Knox be returned? What is the process for that? Or is that?
Well, if I'm following you, and we're going back a ways, and I apologize to the committee, this was about adding 2 counties to the original ESA, and we're going way back now. So there was a $20 million grant, and there's a 5,000 cap on applying. So I understand that whenever that 20 million is up, then that, but we can go out of session again if needed be to answer that clearly, but we're going way back on my memory.
And Mr. I don't want to belabor the point. I'm not going to ask you more questions. I just want to have a conversation with the sponsor and administration at some point. I'm going to go ahead and let us go on because I think some members are concerned about whether it's on the topic or not. But I was here when we discussed it, and I was here when we talked about these grants, and I objected then to how unfair it was that you would give grants to the counties to shore up their systems. And if we're going to expand it now, but we're going to go ahead and. So that's my last question, Mr. I'm good.
Thank you, Representative Love. Response from the sponsor?
One last question. Were you talking about number of students or money? You weren't talking about the okay.
Yeah,
all right.
okay.
The cap is 5,000 students the first year.
Thank you. Representative Warner, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move the previous question.
All right, the question has been called. Any objection to the question? Seeing no objection, we are voting on House Bill 433, moving out to calendar and rules. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? The ayes have it. 433 moves out to calendar and rules.
Okay, committee, thank you for that great debate. Item number 8, this is the one we've been looking for. It's the last one on the calendar. And this one is House Bill 306 by Representative Bolso. He's got a motion and a second. Members, this is the one that was re-referred back to the committee from the House floor last week. Representative Bolso, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There is an amendment that we need to get onto the bill. Barcode 007086.
Motion is second on 00786. That's right. Yeah, it is not a rewrite, but so I'm gonna get you to explain it, but that is the amendment. The bill is already in proper order from previous in the committee. You have motion second. You may explain the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. 6 years ago, in the 2016 session, this body passed what became 47-50-803 that gave private K through 12 schools the ability to implement their own firearms policy. This amendment, if adopted, would simply extend private K through 12 to private pre-K through 12. That's the extent of the amendment, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, members, that's the explanation. We also have had 2 people request to testify. Since the bill is back here, we had to open up the entire bill, so we have a testimony on that. But before I go to testimony, Representative McKenzie, do you have a question?
Yes, and I'll limit my questions to the addition. As you said, we vetted the previous bill. And I thank you, Mr. Chair, and the sponsor for allowing this bill to come back. I just think this was a significant change, and it had nothing to do with the original bill. So thank you for that. To the sponsor, my question is, well, let me ask this one question. Are you aware that teachers at Covenant School actually had weapons in the classroom?
Representative Belso, you recognize?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have no personal knowledge of whether teachers at Covenant had weapons or not.
Representative McKenzie?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, I'll inform you of that fact. And it's been widely known that is the case. As I discussed earlier, I want to ask a question because I know you saw Metro Nashville Police, how they entered the school. Everyone saw how Metro Nashville Police entered the school. If you'll be in an extreme minority if you did not see that. But with that said, as they were entering the school, officer by officer, taking a piece by piece and tapping each other on the shoulder as they cleared out the classroom, what do you think would have happened, especially a pre-K classroom, building, if there has very few adults in the building? It's a pre-K classroom, so per capita, per human being, there's very few adults in the building. What do you think would have happened if a young lady who's a teacher, K4, came out with a weapon?
President Belso?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll answer that question in two ways. First, the policy of the state was already set in 2016. The law is already on the books that allows private schools K through 12 to develop and implement their own firearms policy. So to the extent that perhaps reasonable people could disagree as to whether it is prudent to have firearms at private schools, this body has already made that decision. This bill simply extends that protection from K through 12 to pre-K through 12. And then secondly, I'll point out that the statute that's currently in effect, 47-50-803, provides the flexibility to the private school to develop its own policy. It can prohibit firearms of any type under the statute if, in its view, its staff and its children are best served by having firearms on the property, then it can implement that policy. And in my view, it's those schools that are in the best position to develop that policy for themselves.
You may follow up.
Thank you. And I do thank you for acknowledging, because I would definitely didn't want the public to think that those teachers had those firearms in their classroom illegally. That is within statute existing. But I guess I would say, why would we compound a potentially, based on my example, which you did not address, was my direct question to you. Why would we compound a situation by having I say 40 hours is poorly trained. I would say 40 hours is poorly trained on looking at what those Metro Nashville officers, any officers, go through. I would think if you compared the number of hours, they would be, it would pale in comparison to what a true professional would be required.
You recognize Chairman speaking.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I'm asking for clarification here. If I understand right, it's already in code and permissible for private schools in K through 12, if they so desire, to have teachers armed. If I understand right from the bill sponsor, and a question to him, Mr. Chairman, is all your bill doing is just expanding K through 12 to pre-K through 12? We're not changing the law, are we?
I will allow Representative Bolson to respond.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You are correct, Representative Sapicki, that is all that we're doing. And I'll also point out that the focus of the questions is too narrow because a firearms policy at a private school is not just about arming teachers, to use a term. It obviously allows a private school to have others, parents or volunteers, anyone coming onto the property carrying a concealed weapon with a permit, just the way any other private business is allowed to do. So neither the statute nor the amendment actually addresses simply an issue of allowing teachers to carry firearms. It's much more broadly stated than that.
So,
Chairman Sapicki.
so in regards to my point of order there, it seems that the line of questioning was extrapolating training for SROs or training for personnel or whether or not they should be in there. All we're addressing, Mr. Chairman, is whether or not we're going to go from K through 12 to pre-K through 12. That's the only thing in the bill I see. If I'm wrong, point it out to me, please.
Yeah, thank you. And I was, Representative, and
Could I respond?
you may I say something?
Yes, sir.
Because I was getting ready to ask the same question. It seems like your line of question is going down. If we're just allowing the private schools to as it says in this section, defines private schools, to establish a handgun policy for that school property. We're in no way suggesting what that particular handgun policy is, and you're kind of going specifics on if like this amendment was defining what that policy is. Representative to the sponsor of the bill, am I correct or am I out of order?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The chairman is correct.
Okay, so with that in mind, Representative Kinsey, I'd like for you to keep your comments on the amendment.
Could I respond?
You may, yes, sir, you may.
That's short selling what this amendment is doing. This amendment is creating a law, and I don't have the number that would apply to hundreds, if not 1,000 pre-K programs across this state. You all are marginalizing or peanut butter saying that it's going from K through 12. No, say it this way. This is a new law that's going to apply to hundreds, if not thousands, of new buildings and tens of thousands of students. That's what this amendment does. It's a new law.
May I respond to that to you? It's already in law that a K through 12 private school can set their policy in this manner. This is just saying that if the school is a pre-K through 12, they also can, because if currently, you know how we had to follow state statute, statute and code. If the word pre-K is not in there, then that school's got a problem when they want to define what their handgun policy is. So we're not changing anything, but in the code, pre-K to 12 is currently K to 12. That's the way I understand this amendment. You recognize?
With this amendment, there are hundreds of standalone pre-K schools. I think what you all are saying now, okay, if this school is K through 12, it applies. Now we're saying for those existing schools, and I'll ask legal, am I correct? What you all are saying is for those existing schools that might have added pre-K or may have already had it pre-K, now they get to apply it. But what I'm saying is, no, this is taking the law that applied from K through 12 and now applying it, expanding it to apply from pre-K through 12, which adds additional buildings, facilities, and a lot of other people. So I'd ask legal to say it opine.
Yeah, without objection, I've asked legal. We're out of session. If legal will weigh in. Out of session.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Katie Robertson, Office of Legal Services. The amendment defines private school as a private school as defined in Section 49.6/3001, subsection C, that serves students in any of the grades pre-kindergarten through 12. 49.6/3001C defines private school as a school accredited by or a member of an organization or an association approved by the State Board of Education as an organization accrediting or setting academic requirements in schools, or that has been approved by the state or is in future approved by the commissioner in accordance with the rules promulgated by the State Board of Education. So the pre-K program would have to meet the definition of private school.
Any questions to legal while we're out of session? You recognize Representative McKenzie.
So am I correct in that a private school could have a pre-K program that does not extend to kindergarten? Let's call it La Petite Academy. That pops in my head. Would that apply to a school like that?
Recognize legal.
If the pre-K program meets that definition in 49-6-3001.
Follow up?
Not to legal now.
Okay. Any questions on legal? We're back in session. Did you have any follow-up, Reverend McKenzie?
Okay, yes, I do. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And so I think she's proven my point that this bill applies to all, whether it's pre-K alone, La Petite Academy. I think that pops something in everyone's head, or your local pre-K program that's accredited. They charge money for, it's private, all the way up through the Webb School in Knoxville, Baylor School, Brentwood Academies, and what have you, Catholic schools across this state. So this adds a lot of people. So that's why I was questioning the sponsor of the bill, because this is a significant increase. I think we're marginalizing it, or you all are marginalizing it by saying that it's just pre-K. It's much more than that. That's all I'm trying to say. Thank you. And I'll yield at this point.
Okay. Thank you very much. Members, we're about out of time, but we had two people wanting to testify. And I'm going to let them come up and do exactly 2 minutes if they so desire. They don't have to. Darren Johnson and Erica Bowden, I'll give them each 2 minutes each. We have the first part of the bill we've already discussed, so we don't really need to have, we'll let them talk about that, but we've already discussed that in committee. And then we'll listen, and then we will go back in session, and we will bring this to a close. Without objection, we're out of session. Darren Johnson, Erica Bowman, the Tennessee Equality. Darren, you go first.
Chairman White, Vice Chair Slater, and members of the committee, thank you for allowing me time again to offer perspective on HB 306. I am Chaplain Darren Johnson, a 19-year resident of Davidson County. I will get straight to it. Our landscapes, legal, cultural, and otherwise, have changed dramatically in recent days, and in particular about the two very different topics now legislated by this bill. First, the Supreme Court, with a solid majority of the justices, let stand an injunction against a West Virginia law that would have otherwise prohibited a transgender girl from participating on the track and cross-country teams of which she's been a member. Second, the Federal Department of Education has issued a proposed rule change to Title IX anti-discrimination protections that would prohibit categorically barring transgender athletes. No matter the final rule, there's no getting around the fact that its goal is inclusion. This is in stark contrast to the outright bans that form current Tennessee law. Thus, HB 306, which relies upon these restrictions, would also be subject to new and higher scrutiny. Taken together, these demonstrate legal shifts that expose the state to new risks and cost. The most recent fiscal note still says HB 306 potential costs are insignificant. I challenge that and warn that the citizens of Tennessee are likely to end up on the hook for paying the state's tab when it is forced to try to defend such discriminatory law. And I cannot go without noting the problematics of HB 306's second amendment. Besides straining the bounds of the bill's caption, the marriage of expeditious necessity arguments forwarded on the floor still don't convince. And for me personally, it's hard not to hear a fear whistle in its politically paired machinations. Finally, in expanding yet again the allowable sphere in which guns can be carried, in which their destruction can be wrought, I weep to think that we still have not learned. Weapons of death lead to more death. Cultures of violence beget ever more violence. I urge you to vote no on this bill. Thank you.
Thank you. We now go to Erica Bowden, 2 minutes. And just remember to identify yourself for the, when you hit that, you see the, is it coming on for you? Try it, speak into it.
Hello.
You
Yep.
got it, you got
Okay.
it.
Hi, my name is Erica Boughton. I'm a Williamson County resident and I'm a mom to 3 kids. This amendment concerning more firearms in schools is entirely unrelated to the original bill concerning anti-trans legislation. This feels like a thinly veiled attempt at forcing anti-trans legislation through by leveraging current motivations to pass firearm legislation. This should be its own bill. This feels duplicitous. It also feels hypocritical given recent events. I have here the rules of order for the 113th General Assembly. Number 62, no rider. No amendment by way of a rider shall be received. I am assuming, since Speaker Sexton has made it abundantly clear that violations of House rules is cause for expulsion, that action will be taken for this blatant violation. And if nothing happens, that silence is telling. I don't believe this amendment should be discussed within the context of anti-trans legislation. I would also be remiss if I did not remind the committee of a few points today. This bill forcing students into their biological sex for sports. This is not about science. There are 6 medically defined biological sexes. This isn't even about religion. 6,000 nuns have just declared transgender people beloved and cherished by God. This is about your own hateful opinion, which is unconstitutional to bring into law. Did you consult a geneticist prior to attempting to codify biological sex into law? You are making Tennessee look wildly uneducated. Not to mention, this is entirely unnecessary as private schools can already write their own rules. Is this enough reasons yet? Why are we spending time on bills that will accomplish nothing when there are 3 precious weeks left in this session to address the tragedy, which is there is no gun control in the state of Tennessee? This feels outrageous, and I urge you to reconsider your vote on this entire bill and this amendment, which is clearly unrelated and in violation of House rules.
Thank you, Ms. Bowden. Members, without objection, we're now back and said, thank you all for being here. We appreciate you coming in and expressing your comments. Chairman Reagan? Previous question's been called. Any objection to the question? We're on the amendment, by the way. All those in favor of adding amendment 7086 to House Bill 306 indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Bill has been properly amended. Keep it separate. Chairman Reagan. Previous question's been called on House Bill 306. Any objection? Seeing none, all those in favor of moving House Bill 306 out to county rules indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Committee, thank you all so much. It's been a great. Chairman Sapicki, you're recognized.
Mr. Chairman, it's been brought to my attention, with talking with members of the State Board of Education, that we may have to possibly reconvene this committee in the next couple of weeks with an issue that's come up in regards to standards in history. I'll get with you later, sir.
Excellent, excellent. So don't go anywhere. Before I represent Warren, I just want to say, committee, thank you all for being here. And this has been education is a difficult committee, and we cover a lot of topics, but y'all hung in there for us. And the discussion today was great, and I appreciate it very, very, very much. Was it Warner, Representative Warner? Did you have your hand up?
I got clarification. Thank you, sir.
Okay. Chairman Spicky.
Mr. Chairman, I want to say thank you for doing a fantastic job this year. There's been some very difficult days in this committee. And at times the debate was robust, which is what our job is. But I just want to say thank you, and to Vice Chairman Slater for doing an excellent job this year. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. Let's go to Chairman Representative Love.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I was I was prepping for that, Chairman Sapicki. As is our custom, Mr. Chairman, thank you again for leading us in this committee. And again, I know that there have been some well-needed discussions, but I'm grateful for the opportunity for us to discuss these issues as we try our best to improve policy for all Tennesseans. So thank you, Mr. Chairman, for this committee work. And if we do get called back, we'll see you in a few weeks, I think, or a few days.
Thank you, Representative Love. You're one of the best. So thank you for those comments. So we are adjourned, subject to the call of the chair.